So I went to Bible study today. It was a 9:30 session because our 8 a.m. got canceled due to the Memorial Day holiday. So the two deacons that I met with last week, Greg and Chris. Greg I talked to once before, kind of laid out my story a little bit, told him, here's the deal. June 19th to next July 20th is the hour, day, month, and year. And, Revelation 12 sign. I'm the kid caught up to God. The dad has an arc theory. And, it's either all one big coincidence or, I'm like, I know I'm right. But that's where we're at. Well, anyway, he said, well, let's call in the second. I may call in this another person. So anyway, we had a meeting. It was me, Greg, and then this third person, Chris, last week. And we started to go into it. And I had he's like the typical sort of, I would think that the standard Christian argument would be, well, A, I don't believe you. B, you're not what I expect. C, a Revelation 12 sign, that was a sign. Doesn't mean the kid was caught up and died and went to, died as a baby. It represents Jesus and his ascension. And the church that gets, and the guy's like, as he's rebutting my interpretation of Revelation, he's using the notes at the side of his Bible. I mean, like the things that theologians have argued about for years, for millennia. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, wait. Jeremiah 31, I think it is, where, and I think it's essentially, instead of each man telling each other, no God, it's their interpretation. Theologians, Greg, Chris, rabbis, imams, everyone has their opinion on God, and that's how that's saturated this planet, this world. And in Jeremiah 31, it says you'll no longer have a man saying, no God, because everyone will know God, and everyone will have his laws in their hearts. That's the 10 commandments, the 10 rules that God gave his testimony, as his testimony, in 1300 BC in front of Moses. And that's the whole essence, is in my mind, wherever I go, whatever I do, because I've seen, I've had the pixelation, which in Revelation, it actually ties to the final chapter, Revelation 22, where I think it's like they'll see his face and he'll dwell with them, which means the ark and the 10 commandments will be revealed and they'll see his face. My face? I ain't God. You see God's face. You see the pixelation. He shows you his face. And when he does, after it's a very intimate thing to see the face of God. It's actually talked about in the Bible, which is no man can see his face because he'd surely die. I saw his face. And seeing that, I know in every ounce of my being, not that, I think God exists. I know he exists because I've seen him. 90 seconds and then it went away. And I will never forget that experience. I hope, no offense, God, I hope it never happens again. I don't need it to happen again. But the key is, if it happened with Moses, when he had a bush that burned without burning, and me, when my vision pixelated and every sense of my body activated, if we can do it, you can do it. And if you can do it, when you do it, I guess, if you are worthy to do it. Moses, it took till he was 80, me till I was, 35. You'll never forget that God exists. And what seems drab looking around in the world, no longer seems drab. everything pops. It's like colorful. It takes a little while to adjust to it because you feel alive for the first time in your life. And you never go back to feeling the way that you did before. You have to understand, this is a very rare occurrence to see the face of God. My point is this, that at that moment, because I think it's in Thessalonians 2:5, I don't even know the chapter or the verse, but it's, you resurrect the dead in Christ first. Well, what that means is, when I was deemed worthy enough to have that pixelation, to see the face of God, that was the resurrection of Jesus. Someone on earth unlocked Jesus' resurrection in the spiritual world, and his soul, his essence, his something descended upon me. It was never going to happen unless someone on earth did it first. And now that it's been done, as the first resurrection is described in the book of Revelation, blessed is he who taketh part in the first resurrection. Meaning, there are other prophets to unlock now. But when you do, you'll see the face of God. And that prophet, whoever is assigned to you, will descend upon you. You'll know God exists. I think the only logical way I would think that, if I were God and I had the option to show my face to someone, I'd want to make sure that they recorded it. But when it happens, you'll be so alarmed. Maybe not, I don't want to put thoughts in your head like what to expect or whatever, but you'll need to be so conditioned to pick out or take out your phone and record your reaction to it, so there'll be proof that it occurred. Now, everyone on this planet will think you're insane, but not me, because I've gone through it. And I'll be the judge based off all the other footage you have leading up to that moment to see, A, is this a story written by God? I.e., did this person really follow every coincidence in their life? And then, to lead them to that moment. What is the sequence of events as it relates to their life? So what's the storyline? And is it something that just you would never expect? But it's God, who did the writing of it. So I think that's sort of like the judgment call piece. And the only person capable of doing that is someone who's experienced it before. And that's me. But then when we have another person, then there'll be a third. Although I will say the apostles, when they had the tongues of fire, there's something about that described in the New Testament during the, the Pentecost. I think they had the same thing too, because they were deemed worthy as well. It's almost like a transference of information or something. My point is, this has happened before, and when it does, you're not the same. They spread out to spread a message in different languages. Moses, when he redeemed the Jewish people. And me, I'm going to roll in with heaven on earth. But you have some function. And I think all of these parties, Moses, the apostles, me, we're all setting up or going toward God's perfect version of heaven on earth. So it's like you got to be recording it. You got to be totally honest and admit everything you've ever done wrong. I would think is probably the best place to start. You pull out your phone, admit everything against the 10 Commandments. I believe in God. And just act as if, pretend like he's monitoring every thought, and you're basically the star of this little fucking movie that you're recording, gathering footage, getting used to filming weird, interesting shit that happens in your life. And then the whole, end of the world due to climate change and other sort of disasters that are, all the natural disasters are God-made. The only reason we have technology is because he led us in this direction as a gift for us to all work together this time in history, to usher in heaven on earth. But those, natural disasters are him, and then the man-made stuff, that's us, whatever wars and shit breaks out. But the point is, all of it happening in the background of your story, God knows that you're recording it. And that footage is sacred to him because he is the one arranging things, in your life around you to bring you on this cool journey, having planned around it, in advance 2,000 years in some cases. Book of Revelation was written in the 1st century AD. We're in the 21st century AD. It's 2,000 years ago. And he arranged everything to allow this to occur. Here's my point. You have this killer storyline. You're feeling great. You're acting as if, playing the game that he's monitoring all your thoughts. And then you're going to find out he actually was the whole time. But only when you're worthy. Right? And that's the first resurrection. That's the prize. It's the meaning of life, people. And when it happens, apparently, everyone who, experiences or sees the face of God can prove it, record it. I'll be like, yeah, you know what? They fucking went through it. We'll package it up, and it'll be the book of whatever your name is. The Millennial Testament. And that's him, when you get the pixelation, that's him saying, boop, like, you're good. Not that the story's over, but he's saying, it's going to work out. You don't have to worry about that. Just keep moving forward like Moses. And in fact, even if you don't have a pixelation, if you're following coincidences and you don't give up, it's going to work out too. I'm just the first example. But as more people do this, we'll start to see the resurrection of the dead. So there you go. That's how that piece works. And the second resurrection is when, after 1,000 years or whatever, then it doesn't matter if the people who are prophets that, basically in that spiritual world, like let's say Paul, for example. Paul, some guy on earth, his actions are going to lead to a pixelation, which is Paul's soul descending on that individual. It's matching the spiritual and the, earthly world or whatever. And it resurrects Paul, but it also resurrects the individual because once they see the face of God, they're never going to be the same. It's like me. Colors are brighter. Like, this looks like a fucking video game to me. Not to you, because you haven't gone through it, but when you do, if you're blessed enough to do this, i.e. saying, you know what, I believe in God, like, let's fucking do it, then it'll feel the same way to you. And it'll be a balancing act. When it first happens, you'll feel a little overwhelmed, but I'm here as like sort of a guide to say, you know what, it's all good, man. You're not God. He showed you his face. It's okay. It's not going to happen again. Blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so that's how Paul and you get resurrected at the same time. But as you're recording it, all that footage, which God knows you filmed, like it's packaged up in like that resurrection video is going to be killer, And then we'll get to see Paul like he really was, just like you get to see Jesus, right? I'm just the guy who resurrected his spirit, but you get to see him as he was. You know what I mean? And that's some other verse in the Bible too. So anyway, just thought I'd share that. It's not easy, by the way. And I think we have, 25 days left until June 19th, which is also 6 days before the Mideast peace plan is supposed to be rolled out, unveiled in Bahrain, which is funny because when the Jerusalem embassy was inaugurated on May 14th of 2018, 6 days later is when I God gave me the sort of sea of glass and fire, the Kilauea volcano. My point is, Trump administration had the free will to inaugurate that embassy. 6 days later, boom, I get Revelation 15 fulfilled. So they got to choose first, and then I showed up. Well, in this case, before their planned unveiling of that peace plan, 6 days before, God shows up. Not me, God, like in whatever the fuck he's got in store to kick off the time of Jacob's trouble. I'm Jacob, by the way. It's the period where 1/3 of humanity dies. I'm one of them too. So don't think I'm getting off the fucking hook. It's going to be a tough time for everyone, but if you think of it like that, just start recording things, show God that you're filming what he's putting in front of you. He's not going to let that footage go. to waste by letting something happen to you. But of course, the first thing you got to do is get real. If you have any questions about how to do so, you may want to start at the beginning of this channel, or go to Amazon or iTunes and search for a memoir called Natasha Records. That's the whole story from the beginning, and the footage is on there too. See you guys.